It's a pleasure to be with you guys today. Thanks so much for joining me in this episode of Behind the Score. I'm extremely excited because this is, of course, the season 2 premiere of Behind the Score. In the previous season, we did, The Dark Knight, Gladiator, Titanic. We went through all those scores, dissected them, and sort of broke those down. And in this next season, we're going to go for more contemporary, recent scores. So we're doing Transformers now, and we're planning on doing Wonder Woman soon, and we're going to, do The Mummy as well. So I'm super, super excited to be bringing this to you guys today. Transformers is one of my favorite scores of all time. Steve Jablonsky, I had the pleasure of meeting him in California when I was out there for a score screening, a film music documentary, and he was the nicest, most humble, down-to-earth guy you've ever met, and he's super, super ultra talented, and I can't wait to talk about his music. I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, I'm actually a quite big fan of Transformers. I actually really liked the most recent one, The Last Night, which was completely obliterated by critics, but I don't care because Transformers wasn't created for the critics. It was, of course, created for the people who like that type of stuff. And for me, it's sort of this unbelievable cinematic escape from reality, and it just sort of immerses you in this amazing world. And the way for which Michael Bay works with the cutting team, the editors, and the way that he shoots native 3D, so actual two cameras on two separate camera rigs, and the way that he really immerses you in the picture is a really extraordinary thing. And it's definitely one of my favorite sort of action movies of all time, and I think it really set the stage for many films to come. And so did the score. The score was very, very innovative and really inspired a lot of different scores that came after. So what we're going to do is we're going to first take a look at a little information about Steve Jablonsky, about the scores, 1 through 5. So 1, Revenge of the Fallen, Dark of the Moon. Then we're going to go into Age of Extinction, and then, of course, The Last Night. And then we're going to take a look at this suite that I've sort of arranged just to give us an idea of some of the musical elements, and we're going to go through that, break that down. And if you guys have any questions throughout, I would be absolutely happy to help answer any of those questions. So let's go ahead and get started and move forward with a little information about Steve. So Steve, of course, was trained under Hans Zimmer and Harry Gregson Williams. If you guys don't know this already, I think that he was actually studying computer science or something like that, and he wanted to move into the world of music and sort of called up Remote Control Productions and became involved in that team. And, of course, Harry Gregson Williams at that time was really coming up through Hans, and so he sort of entered the film music world through those two people and Remote Control Productions as a whole. And you can definitely see those elements in his music, which we'll also explore in a second. But one of his most notable director-composer relationships is, of course, Peter Berg, who directed the sort of Mark Wahlberg historical films. So that's Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, and then the recent Patriots Day about the Boston Marathon bombing. And then he also did that movie Battleship, which I also enjoyed, but didn't get well received. But then he also has a very long-standing relationship with the Michael Bay since The Island. So usually Hans and even like on The Rock, Nick Laney-Smith worked with Michael Bay, but I guess Hans sort of passed over Steve Jablonsky in a sense. And they've done all the Transformers films together. They did Pain and Gain. And then, Steve Jablonsky is also signed on to Bumblebee in 2018 and then Transformers 7 in 2019. These are, of course, with different directors, but with Michael Bay producing. And it's also worthy to note that on the previous Transformers installments, Steven Spielberg has been an executive producer. So Steven Spielberg, obviously has seen something admirable in Michael Bay throughout all these films. And there's, of course, been some rough ends, with the second movie. Let's just move on to here. So with the second movie, as you guys know, there was a writer's strike in Hollywood. So there was a big issue when it comes to storytelling in that movie. With the third one, it really sort of brought everything home. You had this amazing Chicago sequence towards the end of the film. Just to put this into perspective, the technical filmmaking that Michael Bay pushes forward in the realm of Hollywood is mind-blowing, and it's even blown the minds of like James Cameron and, as I said, Steven Spielberg. This guy tied a rope through the city of Chicago and sent a dude with an IMAX camera attached to his head through the streets of Chicago in between the buildings. This is next gen stuff. Okay. And then, of course, Transformers Age of Extinction, which came out, I believe, in 2014. And then we have Transformers The Last Night. Now, just to go into some information about these scores, right, we have Transformers 1, which is sort of the classic film, full of rich thematic material that Steve Jablonsky sort of lays the foundation for. And this sort of course, sets the stage for the musical tone and language that follows in the following scores. So Revenge of the Fallen is sort of a continuation of the first, but the opening track, Prime, sort of resembles Autobots in a sense, if you guys remember that cue, which opens the first movie. But it really introduces Optimus Prime's musical theme and musical tone, and as an Autobot, it really carries forward those elements from the first movie. And then, of course, it's still very thematic. It's still constantly including the themes from the first film, and the score in the second movie gets a little bit more electronic, and there's a lot more synthetic elements. But as we go into the third movie, that's really when we get into those electronic elements. There's a lot of low pulses. It sort of sounds like the third one sounds like even like a trailer album or something like that. And it's much more synth based. It has this ambient quality that's very, very interesting. And it's personally my out of all the 5 films, this was my least favorite out of the 5. I really enjoyed the first. I really enjoyed The Last Night. And then I would say it's Revenge of the Fallen, Age of Extinction, and Dark of the Moon. Not to say Dark of the Moon isn't good, because it's great. But out of all 5 of them, I would say, because there's not a lot of memorable stuff in Dark of the Moon. But as we go into Age of Extinction, we really get a lot more interesting stuff, right? We have this sort of hybrid, bombastic, epic, badass, score. And there's a lot of hardcore hybrid hitting tracks. It has this beautiful vocal motif, if you guys remember that. Sort of goes like do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. And it's used all throughout the score, and it's very sort of popish in a sense. And it's called, on the EP, it's called Mesa. And then, of course, the Dinobots charge scene is unbelievable, and the score really accompanies that well. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in Age of Extinction, and it's a 2-hour and 45-minute long movie, so there's obviously a lot of room for musical interest. Then we get into The Last Night, right? So this is sort of like the return home. It's most like the first score than any of the others. It's sort of like the let's finish what we started. It's the most fleshed out, large-scale score of the franchise in a sense. It's like a big accumulation of all of the scores. And we get, a lot of new musical themes as well. We have one for Izzy, which is the little girl. Then we have one for Vivian, which is the female interest of this movie, sort of like the Megan Fox of the 5th one. And then we have Anthony Hopkins' character, Sir Edmund Burton, who has his own theme on the violin, which I also arranged in the suite as well, because it's a very beautiful piece of music. And then we have Calling All Autobots at the end of the movie. So I asked Steve Jablonsky this when I saw him, but he said, pretty much we didn't want to bring Optimus's theme back until the end of the movie. And this is sort of a spoiler alert, but pretty much Optimus is sort of like anti-Earth for most of the movie, because he's under the spell of Quintessa, which is sort of the chick that runs all of Cybertron and is part of like the Decepticons, right? And so you have that going on, and then at the end of the movie, he sort of falls under the good influence, and then they bring back the themes from the previous movies that really closely describe Optimus Prime. So it's a very intentional decision that they made there. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the thematic material that we have, right? So first things first, we have the Arrival to Earth theme. So if I just pull up a piano here, here it is. So right, so it's a very sort of powerful, triumphant, intense, theme that really, really helps to, in that specific scene when the Autobots are actually arriving to Earth, it really creates this powerful motif that's sort of carried through all the movies and really resembles and characterizes the Autobots as a whole. So this is, I would say, one of the main themes, I guess, for the Autobots. And then we have this other theme, which is at the beginning of the movie when they're describing the cube and all that type of stuff, and it goes like this. So that's what we have going on there. And then we have this sort of like Bumblebee / Allspark theme, and it goes like this. And if you heard that correctly, that's actually a part of the Autobots theme, right? So he sort of brings over that into the Bumblebee theme. Then we have the Optimus Prime theme, which goes like this. And that's what, of course, opens the second movie. And then we have the Lockdown theme from Transformers 4, which is also a very, very cool theme, and it's played on a synthesizer, but it goes like this. Sort of like a it's a very badass motif. But anyways, let's just talk a little bit about the sort of musical style and some of the characteristics that that are present in the film. So the first thing you'll obviously notice is he has a particular skill when it comes to using ostinatos as motors, right? This is a skill that, of course, Zimmer has and uses very prominently in scores like The Dark Knight, which we did a behind the score on. So, you know, ostinatos are a very good way to keep the piece moving forward and to keep this momentum and to keep this, like I said, motor. And he uses that all throughout the score, all of the scores, to help do that. And especially since there's so much going on, there's so much action, ostinatos, in other words, repeated figures, work really, really well to help sort of build and to help extend and to help prolong emotions and stuff like that. So it's a very prominent part of the Transformers scores as a whole. And then, of course, he has one of, if not the best ability to take these incredible, small, simplistic themes, meaning both rhythmically, harmonically, actually, and melodically, and he makes them ultra memorable and impactful, right? So Hans is also very, very good with this. And, you know, the themes are so simple in terms of it's just da, 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 da. You know, just simple rhythms, and then we have dun, 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 right? But think about how powerful they are and how sort of like visceral they are to us. That's a really, really important trait of all of these scores, because he has that ability to take something so small and to make it so gigantic and powerful. And the way for which he orchestrates and builds his themes using choir and, of course, introducing it most of the time on the French horn is a very important aspect. And as you will notice listening to the scores, if you rewatch the movies or something, you'll notice that a lot of the times the themes that are associated with the Autobots are introduced with sort of like French horns and brass instruments, in a sense, because Autobots are metal and, you know, stuff like that. And of course, brass instruments, you know, they have that characteristic alike. So he uses that a lot to show Autobots. And for as long as sort of orchestral music has been a thing, you know, brass instruments have really described sort of power and honor and stuff like that. And it works really well with the Autobots, which in the story are these entities that are trying to do anything that they can to protect Earth and to protect the interests of Earth. And so that's pretty much throughout the movies fighting off the Decepticons or Megatron, stuff like that. So that's a very important aspect as well, introducing the themes on the French horn. And then this is an interesting characteristic, but most everything, not everything, there of course are many exceptions, but a lot of stuff in these scores are in D minor. And like, I have nothing against D minor. I actually love D minor, and there's a reason why Hans uses D minor. For all those traditionalists out there who are like, Hans Zimmer only uses D minor. It's an, you know, who gives a shit? You know, if the piece of music sounds good and it has an impact and it emotionally gets to you, and that's what it's about. It's not about, you know, whether it's an E flat. I mean, if you played an E flat, you know, minor, well, that wouldn't be a good way to play it. But if you played an E flat minor, then if you played in B flat minor, you know, it doesn't matter. So D minor is a great key, and, you know, it does the job. And there's a reason why Hans uses it, of course, because the C extension does not allow for vibrato. So if we pull up like a bass, you know, this is the lowest one can go, but one cannot do vibrato on this lower C. And then we have this D, which we can have vibrato on. So, you know, there's a reason why D minor is used a lot in film music. And, you know, who doesn't love D minor? It's great. Okay, and then, so I think the thing that I love about the Transformers scores that you guys will notice as well is that sort of the Transformer scores are the closest thing we have in film music to trailer music, right? I mean, if you were to like take all the battle sequences from Transformers, like the ending Chicago sequence and the third movie, and the forest battle in the second movie, in the China, I think it's China or Shanghai battle in the Age of Extinction. These are such beautifully choreographed battle sequences, and the music almost sounds like it's trailer music. And so if you were to just take all the sequences, you could format like a 3-hour long trailer music album from the Transformer soundtracks, which is a very cool aspect of it too. And as the films went on, interestingly enough, you began to see him move towards electronics more and more and more, especially the third and the fourth movie. You have that piece of music at the end of The Last Night, which is called We Have to Go, and that's actually used in the trailer campaign. It's this very simple repeated chord progression, similar to like Time and the ending piece of the movie Captain Phillips. It has that very sort of repeated building quality to it, and that's definitely an interesting quality as he goes. It definitely metamorphosizes into more electronics. So anyways, we got that out of the way. Let's take a look at the suite. I ramble on way too long, but again, if you guys have any questions throughout this stream having to do with, any of the mock-up or having to do with the Transformer scores in general, and at the end of the video, by the way, we're going to be voting for what we want to do for the next Behind the Score, and I want to hear your guys' input on that. So without further ado, I'd like to present the suite that I arranged for Transformers. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you guys are all having a fantastic Monday. Again, thanks for coming. Let's go and take a look. Alrighty, so there we go. There it is. So yeah, so that's just a little, I guess, representation of some of the musical elements. And we have, of course, we start off the suite with Autobots, the opening track of the first score. Then we move into Prime, which is the opening track of the second score. We have a little section of the track No Sacrifice, No Victory, which is also from the first score. We have Decepticons from the first score, and then we have Arrival to Earth, and then, of course, we finish with Sir Edmund Burton, and there's a reprise of the Autobots theme in Arrival to Earth at the end of the piece. So, first of all, what I want to chat about really, really quick is the Decepticons, right? So, of course, you guys probably know who the Decepticons are in the context of the films. They are the bad guys. Autobots are the good guys. They're both from Cybertron. Decepticons, though, sort of turned on the Autobots and want to cause destruction to everything, including Earth, because there's the Allspark and there's the Cube, and you have that stuff. And so, of course, the Decepticons need to have some type of musical element that's aggressive and bitey and intense and intimidating. And when you first hear it, you automatically can sort of tell that's what the music is describing. And then, of course, as the music sort of continues to develop throughout the series, you have that Decepticons theme coming back to remind the viewer of the Decepticons and how evil and powerful they are, right? So the element that Steve Jablonsky used in the scores was a low choir. So what we have going on here is, so this is Oceania, of course, and it goes like this. Sounds sort of funny without the context, right? But then when we go in and we take a look at everything else that's happening, that's over here. Sometimes it's hard to navigate around these big sections. Okay, so it's right here. Here it is. So we have this percussion sort of really creating that. It's sort of like metal in a sense. Like this, the Decepticons thing is sort of like metal music because it's just like boom. It's just in your face. It's sort of chugging away. It's very intense. So here it is again. So while we're at it, let's talk about percussion right now. So I recently got this guy. Let's see. Come on. Yeah, here it is. Strike Force. So this is a beast. It's a great instrument, and it's very really sort of big and beefy. And then we have these Chinese taikos. Interestingly enough, from Eduardo Tarante's, it's just from the Engine Artist Library, so it's actually free. It's just this one little patch, and it has these really big, sort of dry, in-your-face taiko drums, and it's solo, of course, which it works really, really nice. Then we have these, throughout the piece, we have these bucket hits that are sort of on the beat and just sort of carrying everything forward. All right, so if we solo that and play that. It's just sort of adding momentum to everything. And then these paper juns are sort of like, if you were to print stems of this piece, you'd put them in mids. It just adds that sort of nice little mid flare and just sort of fills up the percussion section. Here it is again. I apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Truly, it's Satya Prasad. You ask all by ear. Yeah, so this piece was all by ear. Just to sort of give you guys an idea of how I prep for behind the score episodes, is what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll watch the movie. In this case, it was watching all 5 of them, and I'll just sit there with a notepad and just sort of take notes down of things that I notice, and then at the end I'll go back and I'll go through the soundtracks and just sort of map out the elements that I want to include in the suite and why those elements I think should be involved and what they sort of how they're different from a lot of other musical elements in other scores and stuff. So yeah. So what we have going on in our strings in the Decepticons piece, since we're already here, I'll just solo these guys out. So For strings, most of the time, it's a combination of Metropolis Arc 1, Metropolis Arc 2, and Cinematic Studio strings. And for the meantime, what I've been using for short or spiccatos is Novo. If I just bring up this guy. It's a very nice sort of bitey, and the mod wheel controls the intensity, which is really, really helpful. So, like, it's a really, really nice sound. And that's what we have going on for our shorts. So in Decepticons, we just have this sort of like dun 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 dun. Another element that I was talking about, which is the motor, which is created by the string ostinatos, right? So see, if you were to just get rid of that, now there's this awkward dead space, and you're sort of like, what do I put there to sort of make it interesting? What do I put there that doesn't make the listener bored? Well, you just put a motor. It's just sort of like a car motor. It just keeps the thing running and keeps everything going smoothly. And that way you can just sort of like, it keeps the listener engaged. And so for these shorts, we have Metropolis Arc 1, and I've always been a fan of these guys. They're very, very gigantic and beefy. When it comes to Kalenias, Kalenia is an interesting articulation, and some libraries sort of get it right. Some are a bit interesting and odd and sort of get it wrong. And for me, I find the Kalenias in Metropolis Arc 1 virtually unusable because it's a combination. I think it's a combination of Kalenio and Bartok, and it's just so loud and bombastic. It's almost unusable. And the one in what's the library from 8Dio? Majestica, that one as well is just so aggressive. It's virtually like, I don't even know how you really include it. But these guys from Albion 1, Spitfire Audio, it's a very nice sound. And it works really, really well to sort of add this very mean, aggressive layer to the Decepticon string section, which is mainly just these low chugs, and then you have that motor. So you have these groups of threes and then twos, threes and then twos, threes and then twos, and then as you go over here, you have two groups of threes. Leading your way into the Decepticons chant. And then, of course, why not have some bass trombones, especially they can go just so freaking low. And these ones from Metropolis Arc 2 are very, very helpful. So that's what we have really going on in the Decepticons piece. And as you saw with the suite and the visuals that I put in front of it, or in front of the MIDI, it really works well with characters like Megatron, which are just so in your face and aggressive, and there's no sympathy, and there's just destruction and death. So I think it works really well with that. Let's go ahead and head on over to the beginning of the track with Autobots. So this is sort of like one of the most legendary Transformers pieces. I know that for most people who enjoy listening to the Transformers scores, it's like this and Arrival to Earth that are the big ones, and it's because this one has this amazing theme, and I'll just play it really quick. This is, by the way, Berlin Brass, the horn ensemble. So it's very simple. The harmony is very simple, and Steve Jablonsky would be the first one to tell you it's simple. I even saw an interview where he's like, Transformers music, people like it, but it's so simple. In terms of harmony and in terms of the melodic content of the theme, it's simple, but the way for which he surrounds it in this sort of grand orchestration, that's the difficult part. So how does he start it? He starts it with this awesome sort of low sub-bass element, which is, here it is. So I actually used a patch from Omnisphere, and it's called the CS80 swell verb, and I used it because, why not? Blade Runner, it has this. Sounds pretty good. And the low section. And you might ask, why would you use this and not use one of those sort of sub-under basses that, you know, something like Albion 3 would provide for you? Well, the reason why is because this has this very sort of long, extended pad-like quality that's needed for the intro, and I just figured might as well use it throughout the rest of the piece as well, because it sort of does two jobs. It adds that pad element, then it adds that sub-bass element. And so when you add that, and then you add your contrabass, just to give it that sort of natural string section vibe, you get this. And so what we're doing with the metals, I didn't find any patch that had that dun 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 dun. So of course, just throw a delay on something, and I figured just throw a delay on damage, because this guy's pretty much knocked it out of the ballpark when it comes to metals. And I'm sure that's what Steve Jablonsky did as well. He just took a metal sound and he just put a delay on it. And I could show you the delay settings. It's a stereo delay, meaning it's putting the delay on two separate sides. So you can even, you know, if you wanted to, you'd never do it, but it's sort of a cool effect. Actually, you might do it. So that way you get like sort of the hits on the, you know, on the groups of 4, but then you get that seamless 16th note motor. So that's what we have going on there. And then our strings come in here in an ostinato form like this. And both the string parts aren't playing the same thing. We have violins 1 and 2, and each of them are playing something a bit different, but they're sort of like building the harmony. So if you just play that. And so like I said, when you add that motor under the string section, you get this. And then our horn ensemble, just to really add that rich mid-end. And that creates that sort of bed that the main melody could sit on top of, right? So whenever you're, you know, for anyone who's looking to figure out when you have a theme, how do you really orchestrate it, and how do you build something around it that keeps it interesting? Well, there's something definitely to learn from the way Steve Jablonsky approaches it here, right? So there's a few main elements. There's the harmony that he introduces that is carried in the brass. So right, you know. It's because it has that mid-full sort of full end, I don't know, it has a very sort of rich feel to it. And then he adds the strings as sort of like a very, I don't know, natural, non-synthetic element to the lower synthesis stuff. So then you have that, oops, nope. I don't want to answer your call. Stop. I'm in the middle of something. Jesus Christ. No, but yeah, so you had that underbass, and then of course you had the string element come in, and then you have the motor come in, and then as the theme is sitting on top of that, what you really have going on is the string section, by the way. The string section isn't filling in all the harmony, okay? The harmony is being filled in by the brass ensemble, but the string section is adding in the low end. So, you know, don't do this to me. It usually fixes itself. But yeah, so you have the brass with the harmony, the strings with the low end, then you have that synthetic element as well, and then that allows for the brass to sort of sit on top of that. So when we put this on there, we get this. Octave up. High strings come in. So right when we bring in high strings, we bring them in octaves. That's a very important aspect of making it nice and powerful. So like if I just play this, some of you guys might know what playing strings in octaves means, but just to put it into perspective, like you could see it's playing this note, which is of course C5, but then it's also playing C4. So it adds a very rich element when you put it all together. So if we just solo out our strings, you get that really nice, intense quality with the string octaves. And the thing you'll notice is that when that big section comes in, then you introduce the full harmony into the string section. Beforehand, all you really had was the low end, and you just had one string voice that was just sort of helping to accompany the brass section. But, you know, when you bring in all of your strings, you bring it in, you know, heavily by introducing all the harmonic voices into it. So you get that full, rich sound. So that's just a nice little tip or trick when it comes to like sort of orchestrating. And then in our percussion again, it's pretty simplistic. Like I said, we have those sort of delayed metals, and then as we go into this section, we introduce a bit more percussion. We introduce some snares, which are commonly used in these scores to just add a little militaristic feel to it. You know, so. So the same way that we're using the bucket hits in Decepticons, we're using right here. We're just using them on the downbeats just to add a little bit of continuity and a little bit of something that sort of wraps everything together, you know? Then we have our mid-end being presented with the paper juns. We have our low-end being presented with the large taikos, and then we have that snare element as well. And when you add all that together with the, you know, the strike force, you get this. So really, percussion is all about how you layer and how you take one element and you combine it with another element. That's really what it all comes down to. And in a sense, you know, music in general is really like that. I mean, the thing that I always loved about orchestral music, and I think that a lot of the people that write orchestral music, including people like John Williams and all the great legends out there, is the thing that's amazing is that when you're in like a rock band or something, you have to think about it like a painter with colors, right? When you're in a rock band, you might have 5 musicians with 5 instruments, 5 colors. But what if you had, you know, more colors? You could create a more detailed, interesting, intriguing picture. And when you have violins, violas, cellos, basses, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, French horns, tubas, you know, it allows you a wider palette, and it allows you to tell a story in a more interesting, detailed way. And when you take certain elements, like the, you know, for example, the flute and the violins, and you combine them, you get a whole new instrument. So you have to look at it like that. It's almost like mixing colors. And the way for which great composers like John Williams orchestrate by combining colors to create new colors, that's something that's very interesting. And I urge you to just, you know, check it out just by popping up some patches, so trying to combine stuff, seeing how it works. Yeah, so that's a really important aspect. Let me try to get caught up with what's going on in the chat. I really apologize. I've been too into this for a sec. So there's just a little bit about Autobots before we move on. Dirk is here. Hey Dirk, how you doing, man? Love your stuff. I'm doing great, Benjamin. Thanks for asking. Bayhem, Paul. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hate to say it. I really hate to say it, because it causes, you know, people like to go crazy on, you know, the internet and stuff and hate. I think Michael Bay is a really easy target. He's a really easy target. He's a guy with a lot of money who makes movies for a couple $100 million, and there's these gigantic, crazy action scenes and attractive people in his movies, and it's an easy target for the common people. But for people who just like to go into a movie theater, to sit down, to escape life, and to get on a roller coaster, and to just enjoy and be immersed and view the spectacle that is his cinematic world that he's created using digital effects and amazing production techniques, for me, that's something that's really interesting and enjoyable. And that's the reason why I like the Transformers movies. You know, sometimes you don't always need insanely in-depth characters and insanely in-depth stories. Sometimes really what it's about is just creating a fun roller coaster, cinematic, immersive experience for the viewer. And a lot of movies are like that nowadays. You know, maybe the story isn't perfect, and, you know, but from a spectacle standpoint, it's great. So that's why I enjoy it. So Bayhem, he's good with explosions, but explosions are fun, so why not? You only work in Cubase now. Actually, yeah, I do work on Cubase. I recently got done with a project which I can't talk about, but I was using Logic because the composer that I was working with, this was in Los Angeles. I just got back yesterday, but the composer I was working for was using Logic, so I had to get onto that. Hey Miriam, how you doing? Here we go. Okay, I'm so far back. Crap. Thank you, Dirk. Before the violin part, at the end is a really interesting contrary motion arrangement. Ashton, please go into that later. Sure thing. I could get into that. Nice arrangement. Thank you. Sounds interesting. Don't worry about your pronunciation. I totally destroyed. Let's see. What a genius melody. It is great. There was a black cat behind Ashton a couple minutes ago. I do have 4 cats. I have 4 cats. I have this beautiful black one who's sort of like the queen of the house. I have this amazing Norwegian forest cat, which is just beautiful. And then I have this almost like Aslan cat, it's gray and it's beautiful. And then I have this sort of like grandpa mean angry cat who's feel bad for him. Great. Perfect. So let's continue to move on. And like I said, if you guys have any questions as we move forward, please do not hesitate. Oh, let me take a look at Twitch. Crap, I forgot about that. Okay, great. All right, so let's move on. Boom. All right, so we're moving on to Prime, which is a piece of music that's supposed to represent Optimus. So if you guys have seen the movies, Optimus is, of course, a character that is sort of the leader of the Autobots and is the definition of good on Cybertron. So how do you present a theme that's good yet captures his urge and his wanting to protect humanity and Earth? Will you do it with this theme? So as you guys realize, it's very similar to Autobots in a sense because you have this very sort of ambient intro. You have the motor being created by the string ostinatos. Then you head into your theme, which again is introduced by the French horns, as we spoke about earlier, because of the whole Autobots thing. And so the theme is... I mean, and when you have a simple theme like that, it allows you much more flexibility in doing variations of it and making it interesting and unique and different in different arrangements. So in this case, it's really just about making it big and mighty because it's the intro to the movie. So here you have these two guys doubling each other. You have the violas and the violins doubling each other, which is interesting because in Autobots, we had them playing something different and sort of like harmonic. We saw them playing together in a sense versus playing just on top of each other. But here we just wanted something powerful, so we just doubled them. And then again, we have our basses. Bring in our strings. So yeah, one thing I want to touch on, for anyone who is a composer or wants to be a composer or is interested in sort of like technology and sample libraries and stuff like that, a lot of people would say, Metropolis Arc 1 is for loud stuff. Metropolis Arc 2 is for quiet stuff. Not really. I mean, almost all the string legatos that I'm using in this piece are from Metropolis Arc 2, which is actually described to be an ultra quiet. And even if you look at the UI, you know, our strings are playing pianissimo, you know, throughout the whole thing. But, you know, it adds this. Oops. If you play like a melody with it, you know. You know, so it has a really great legato, and it has that realistic buzz. So that's great. And so our percussion. Again, we're introducing higher strings. And we move our melody up one octave. So if you want to make your melody more emotional, you can either, you know, increase the amount of orchestration, or you can just rise, you know, the main theme an octave and double it with something. In this case, we have our French horn, and we're doubling it with high strings, and it gives a pretty good effect. I believe it's this guy we're doubling it with. So let's just... So there you go. And then we introduce our choir, which in this case is Lacrimosa, which is a great library from ADO. Which if you solo it out, it doesn't sound good, but if you put it in the context of everything, it adds a nice, interesting element. So yeah, that's pretty cool, and I really love the harmony on this specific one, because you have like this. You introduce the third. Anytime you have like a minor and then a third up, or the third in the bass, it adds really nice effect. It's like the same thing with the whole. You know, it's all because the third and the bass, and when you add that with the classic Steve Jablonsky epic orchestration, and then our brass section, I'm actually using the 12-horn ensemble patch as a bass element, which is, you know, it's most commonly used for main French horn lines. But I used it because it goes all the way down. And it has a nice, like, meaty tone to it, and it works well with the rest of the brass section. Don't do this to me. But yeah, I mean, like... And if you realize, I mean, look at the whole piece. It's almost like string ostinatos are just going through everything. I mean, if there's one thing to learn from this stream, it's that if you're looking to keep something moving forward but not have too much going on, string ostinatos are your way to go. Steve Jablonsky knows that, and that's why he uses it so much. It's a great element to include. This is Pirates. This is Transformers, not Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah. Oh, you're talking. That wasn't Pirates. That was Star Wars. You know. We already did that one. So we're moving on to Arrival to Earth. Arrival to Earth is interesting, right? Because we have this very atonal introduction, and then we go into our strings, and our strings are sort of very exposed, and we don't have any brass going on at that moment. And then we introduce this female voice come in, and then the next time we play it, it's doubled with that female voice, and we begin to add other elements. And then eventually we have this building section where we are modulating, and then eventually we end up in D minor. Of course, because D minor. When we end up in D minor, we have this big, epic, bombastic conclusion. And so, yeah, let's check it out. Excuse me. Son of a... Okay. Minor sixth in the cellos. Boom. We're going to repeat that. And then the female voice. Now, okay, so a situation like this, by the way, is when you begin to see both of Steve Jablonsky's influences come into play. So, he trained under Hans Zimmer and Harry Gregson Williams. Great. Hans Zimmer, you see the string ostinatos, you see the French horn themes, you see D minor, you see lots of stuff like that. And then you move into something like this, and bam, you begin to see the Harry Gregson Williams influences. You have the amazing choral writing. You have the amazing arrangements and surrounding orchestration. You have a very sort of musical element added to the Hans Zimmer influence, right? So you see those two things come into play in a situation like this, which this is just a case of like a hybrid composer. When I say hybrid, I don't mean like, hybrid, like, crazy mechanical sound effects, but I mean hybrid as in two influences creating one culmination. Because really, as composers, we really are sort of a combination of all of our influences. We take certain things that we like and certain things that we don't like, and we put it into our style, and that's how we sort of build our own musical identities. And so with Steve Jablonsky, you can see both the Harry Gregson Williams influence and the Hans Zimmer influence. So for all the composers out there that are watching this or that are interested in getting into composition, really make sure that you have you're listening to as much as you possibly can to build your pools of influence and to build the amount that you're intaking to create your own custom style. Because if you think about it, if you're only listening to Hans Zimmer and John Williams, your music is really going to sound very similar to Hans Zimmer and John Williams, and it's not going to expand beyond that. But if you're listening to Hans Zimmer, John Williams, Alan Silvestri, if you're listening to Steve Jablonsky, then you're taking a listen to Howard Shore, and you have all these different things, and there's certain things that you like in certain pieces. You can take those stylistic attributes and put it into your own style. And that's exactly what we're doing on Behind the Score, in a sense, right? We're going through all these scores and we're nitpicking certain things that work really well. In this case, it's string ostinatos, themes in, French horns and we're talking about the whole hybrid composer thing, which is good. So that's what we have going on here. And so this is sort of adding some movement below everything. So this section right here from bar 187 to bar 213 is just one gigantic modulation. And if you don't know what a modulation is, it's pretty much when you are going from one key to another. So if I just pull up a piano, I can show you what's going on here, right? We're starting in C minor. We're going back, you know, full step to B flat. Then we go to E flat minor. We're just continuing this sequence. There we go. Then sus. That's one thing you'll hear a lot in Harry's music, but you don't hear too much in Hans's music, is sus force. And then we're back in D minor. So there you go. And then once we're done with our modulation, we go into a much bigger version of what we had beforehand. So I'll just play through this. Choir is maintained. This is our choir. Keeping this note the same. And then we're building that one. Lowering that one. And then our sus. We have our 1 and our 5 in our choir. Come on. Perfect example of why I need VE Pro, but I just don't do it. So we have Women's Choir from Metropolis Arc 1 singing the melody. Men's Choir from Metropolis Arc 1 giving the harmony. Then in the percussion, we have this very sort of momentum-based rhythm. Which is cool. And yeah, so that's really what we have going on in Arrival to Earth. There's not anything crazy, but what it's really about, I guess, in a sense, is introducing different layers. And when you have your string section here, and then you've suddenly introduced this amazing female choir, that adds another element. And then you introduce more elements, and you just begin to, you know, go crazy with orchestration. That's how you create interesting textures. So there you go. All right, so let's move on to... Dang, are we already on Sir Edmund Burton? Okay, so this is a piece from Transformers 5. This is the ending of the movie when Sir Edmund Burton, spoiler alert, dies. But of course, this is introduced earlier in the film when the main character, Mark Wahlberg's character, meets Sir Edmund Burton at his castle in England. And so, yeah, so it's a really nice violin theme, and I can just play it here. I think it's in... What key is this in? A minor. Okay, great. So it goes like this. Oh, wait. Again, we're going up an octave. And by the way, if you have a Joshua Bell violin and you want to create a portamento, just go on the ultimate tiniest velocity. So that's what we had going on here. And so all we had as our sort of texture below the violin is a man's choir. And then we introduced the female choir over here to add that really nice warmth that the female voice provides. So this is all that's carrying our harmony, to be honest. Strings are introduced here. And so it's our female choir. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I really hope, hopefully, you learned something. And if you did, please leave that down below in the comments. And I'd really love to hear any recommendations that you guys have when it comes to future streams. Any ideas that you guys have in terms of expanding the YouTube channel and things that you guys are interested in learning. And I really, really am glad that you guys continue to enjoy the Behind the Score series, and that's why I continue to make it, because hopefully it's doing something that is helping you. So again, thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next month on episode 2, season 2 of Behind the Score.